The deer's eyes fluttered open, dark and liquid in the moonlight filtering through the canopy above. Luna's small hands remained pressed against its flank, her face scrunched in concentration as silver tears traced paths down her cheeks. The gaping wound from the poacher's trap had sealed completely, leaving only matted fur and the faintest pink line beneath. "There," Luna whispered, her voice carrying that ethereal quality it always took on when she used her gift. "Better now." Elena's breath caught in her throat as she watched her daughter gently stroke the deer's head. The animal rose on unsteady legs, gave Luna's palm a grateful lick, then bounded into the misty darkness between the towering cedars. Another life saved, another reminder of what her children truly were. "Mom?" Marcus appeared at her elbow, his dark hair damp from the perpetual drizzle that shrouded their hidden cabin. At 7, he already possessed an unsettling awareness that made Elena's chest tighten. "You're doing the worried face again." She forced a smile, crouching to pull both twins close. They smelled like rain and pine needles and something else, something hauntingly familiar that she tried not to think about during daylight hours. "Just making sure you're both okay. It's getting late." "The deer was hurt," Luna said simply, as if that explained everything, as if stopping to heal every wounded creature they encountered in these ancient woods was perfectly normal for a 7-year-old. "I could feel its pain." Of course you could, Elena thought, her fingers automatically checking Luna's pulse. Always slightly faster than a human child's, always running just a degree cooler. Marcus was the same, beautiful, impossible, and growing stronger every day. 3 years. 3 years since she'd fled Seattle in the middle of the night with 2 4-year-old children who had just saved a dying patient by touching him. 3 years of living off the grid in this ramshackle cabin she'd bought with cash, homeschooling brilliant children who asked questions she couldn't answer, researching blood disorders and genetic mutations that couldn't possibly explain what her twins could do. 3 years of lying to herself. "Come on," she murmured, guiding them back toward the warm glow of their cabin windows. Bath time, then story time. The routine was sacred now, normal childhood rituals to anchor them in humanity. She'd given up her career as Seattle's youngest pediatric surgeon, abandoned her research, cut ties with everyone she'd ever known, all to preserve this illusion of ordinary family life in the middle of nowhere. But as they walked the familiar path home, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted tonight. Luna's healing had been more powerful, more effortless than ever before, and Marcus, she'd caught him testing his strength earlier, lifting fallen logs that should have required a grown man to move. They were changing, growing into whatever they were meant to become. Inside the cabin, Elena went through the motions, running warm baths, heating soup, reading Where the Wild Things Are for the 100th time. But her mind kept drifting to that night 7.5 years ago, the mysterious stranger with ancient eyes and a voice like velvet over steel, the way he'd looked at her across that hotel bar in Prague, where she'd been attending a medical conference, as if he'd been searching for her his entire existence. One night, one impossible, perfect night that had changed everything. She'd never even learned his real name. "Mom?" Luna's voice pulled her back to the present. Both children were tucked into their twin beds, hair still damp from their baths, watching her with those unnaturally perceptive eyes. "Why don't we have any pictures of our daddy?" Elena's blood turned to ice. They'd never asked before, never shown any curiosity about the father she'd told them had died before they were born. She struggled to find words that wouldn't be complete lies. Sometimes it's too sad to keep pictures. Sometimes it's easier to remember people in our hearts. But we don't remember him at all, Marcus pointed out with devastating 7-year-old logic. How can we remember someone in our hearts if we never met him? Because he's in your blood, Elena thought desperately. Because every time you use your gifts, every time your eyes flash silver in the moonlight, every time you move with impossible grace, you become more like him. "You have parts of him," she said instead, kissing each of their foreheads. "Good parts. The parts that make you want to help things that are hurt." She turned off the lights and retreated to her own room, But sleep was impossible. Outside, the November wind howled through the ancient trees, carrying scents and sounds that made her pulse quicken with memories she'd tried so hard to bury. Somewhere out there, in a world she'd left behind, the father of her children still existed, still ruled, still believed she was dead. But how long could that last? How long before someone noticed the pattern of miraculous healings in these woods? How long before the wrong person asked the right questions? Elena pressed her face to the rain-streaked window and whispered a prayer to whatever gods might listen. Just let them stay children a little longer. The prayer offered no comfort. Elena remained at the window until the first pale hint of dawn crept through the storm clouds, her breath fogging the glass as she watched for movement in the tree line. Nothing stirred except wind-tossed branches, but the feeling of being watched, of being hunted, never left her anymore. She'd felt it for weeks now, a prickling awareness that made her check locks twice and keep the children closer than usual. Paranoia, she told herself. The isolation was getting to her. But Elena had learned to trust her instincts, especially the ones that whispered of danger. By 7 a.m., she had coffee brewing and oatmeal warming on the wood stove. The twins emerged from their shared room like sleepy ghosts, Luna clutching a stuffed rabbit with one ear that Marcus had mended last month when she'd cried over its torn seam. He'd pressed his small hands to the fabric, and somehow, impossibly, it had been whole again. Morning lesson after breakfast, Elena announced, settling into their careful routine. Structure was everything now. Normal childhood rhythms to keep them grounded in humanity instead of whatever else they might become. Marcus yawned, his canine teeth slightly sharper than they should be. Can we do the anatomy books again? I want to understand why the deer's leg bone was fractured in 3 places, but Luna only needed to touch one spot to fix it all. Elena's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. 7 years old, and he was analyzing healing patterns with the curiosity of a medical resident. We'll start with basic biology, she said carefully. Build up to the complex stuff. But we already know the basic stuff, Luna piped up, steam from her oatmeal curling around her face. Yesterday when I helped the baby owl, I could feel all its tiny bones, like a map under my fingers. Why can we feel things other people can't? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications Elena wasn't ready to address. She'd been dreading this conversation for 3 years, the moment when her brilliant, impossible children would start demanding real answers instead of gentle deflections. Some people are just more sensitive, she said lamely. Like how some people can hear music better, or see colors more clearly. Marcus fixed her with a stare that was far too knowing for his age. Mom, we stopped Mrs. Henderson's cat from dying last week when it got hit by that logging truck. Its spine was broken. Luna and I both felt it. And now it's running around like nothing happened. Elena's coffee turned bitter in her throat. Sarah Henderson was their nearest neighbor, 5 miles down the mountain road, a widow in her 70s who'd taken to leaving fresh bread on their porch and asking careful, kind questions about their life. Elena had been grateful for the human contact and terrified of it in equal measure. Did Mrs. Henderson see what you did? The question came out sharper than she'd intended. We were careful, Luna said quickly. Like you taught us. We waited until she went inside. Relief and pride warred in Elena's chest. They were learning discretion at least. But for how much longer could they hide gifts that grew stronger every day? After breakfast, she spread their homeschool materials across the kitchen table that served as everything, from dining room to laboratory to art studio. Mathematics for Marcus, who devoured equations like candy. Literature for Luna, who read 3 grades above her level and wrote stories about creatures that could fly without wings. Science for both of them. Carefully edited versions that didn't include the impossible things they could already do. The morning passed in blessed normalcy. Marcus worked through algebra problems, while Luna illustrated a story about a healing garden. Elena graded their work, and tried to ignore how Marcus solved complex equations in his head, how Luna's drawings seemed to move when viewed from the corner of her eye. At noon, Her satellite phone buzzed, one of only 3 people who had the number. Elena's stomach dropped when she saw the caller ID. "Dr. Martinez," she answered, stepping into her bedroom for privacy. Elena. The voice of her former colleague at Seattle Children's Hospital carried across the static-filled connection. "I hope you and the twins are well." Carmen Martinez was the only person from her old life who knew where Elena had gone, and only because Elena had needed someone to forward medical journals and handle the sale of her Seattle condo. The official story was a family emergency back east. Carmen had never questioned it, but Elena sometimes caught a note in her voice that suggested she suspected more. "We're fine." "Quiet. How are things at the hospital?" "Busy as always. But Elena," Carmen's voice dropped, "I thought you should know. Someone was here asking questions about you last week. A man, foreign accent, expensive clothes, said he was conducting research into gifted children for some European foundation." Elena's blood turned to ice. Her hand tightened on the phone until her knuckles went white. "What kind of questions?" "About your twins, their medical records, birth circumstances." "I didn't tell him anything, of course, but—" Carmen paused. "Elena, he knew things. Specific things about the night you left. About the patient who miraculously recovered right before your resignation." The phone slipped in Elena's suddenly sweaty palm. After 3 years of hiding, someone was finally asking the right questions. "What did you tell him?" Elena's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Nothing. Patient confidentiality exists for a reason." Carmen's tone sharpened with professional pride. "But Elena, he wasn't just fishing. He had details. The exact time you clocked out that night. The fact that you cleaned out your locker before your shift officially ended. He knew you left Seattle with children, and he seemed very interested in their ages." Elena sank onto her bed, legs suddenly unsteady. Through the thin bedroom wall, she could hear Marcus explaining fractions to Luna using cookie analogies. Normal children, living a normal life. The lie she'd built their entire existence around was crumbling. Did he leave a name? Any contact information? Called himself Dr. Victor Thorne. Said he represented the Carpathian Institute for Genetic Research. "Elena, I looked it up. That institute doesn't exist, at least not publicly." The Carpathian Mountains. Elena's mouth went dry as unwanted memories surfaced. Ancient castles shrouded in mist, legends whispered in Prague hotel bars about creatures that ruled from the shadows. The region where she'd met the twins' father 7.5 years ago. How long ago was this? 5 days. "But Elena," Carmen hesitated, "there's more. After he left, I did some digging. That miraculous recovery you witnessed? Tommy Chen, the boy with acute leukemia? His parents have been contacted too. Different person, same story. Research into spontaneous remissions in children." Elena's vision blurred at the edges. Tommy Chen had been hours from death when she'd brought the twins to visit the hospital one last time before their planned move. 4-year-old Luna had insisted on saying goodbye to the sad boy she'd glimpsed through a doorway. Elena had allowed 30 seconds, just long enough for Luna to touch Tommy's hand while he slept. He'd been in complete remission by morning. "Elena, are you there?" "I'm here." She forced words past the constriction in her throat. "Carmen, I need you to promise me something. If anyone else comes asking questions, anyone, you've never heard of us. The sale of my condo went through a realtor. You never had forwarding information. You have no idea where I went. You're scaring me. What's really going on?" Elena closed her eyes, listening to her children's laughter drifting from the kitchen. They had no idea their world was about to shatter. Again. "I can't explain, but please, Carmen, forget we ever existed." She ended the call before Carmen could respond and stood frozen in her bedroom, mind racing through impossible scenarios. Someone was hunting them. Someone with resources and knowledge and connections to a world Elena had prayed they'd never have to face. A crash from the kitchen snapped her back to the present. "Sorry." Luna's voice carried a note of panic. "The bowl just... it slipped." Elena rushed to the kitchen to find both children staring at the remains of her favorite ceramic mixing bowl, scattered across the wooden floor in perfect geometric pieces. But that wasn't what made her breath catch. It was the way the fragments were arranged, like a flower pattern, too precise to be accidental. "I was trying to clean up our art supplies," Luna said quickly, tears threatening. "But when I picked up the bowl, it felt warm. And then it just broke apart." Marcus knelt beside his sister, carefully collecting the pieces. "It's not her fault, Mom. Sometimes things break when we touch them if we're upset." Elena stared at her son, processing his casual admission. "Sometimes things break?" The twins exchanged one of their silent conversations, a flicker of eye contact that spoke volumes. "We didn't want to worry you," Marcus said finally. "It only happens when we're scared or sad. Like the opposite of healing." "How long has this been happening?" "A few months," Luna whispered. "We've been really careful. Only little things. And only when nobody was watching." Elena sank into a kitchen chair, the full scope of their situation crystallizing. Her children weren't just gifted healers. They were growing into something far more powerful, and someone was actively hunting them. She had a choice to make, and she had to make it now. Stay and hope their pursuers would give up, knowing that was a fantasy. Run deeper into the wilderness, which would only delay the inevitable while making her children into permanent refugees. Or face the truth she'd been avoiding for 7 years. Their father had to be told. The Vampire King needed to know his children existed, that they were in danger, that the careful balance between their world and his was about to collapse. Elena looked at Marcus and Luna, still carefully collecting ceramic fragments, still trying to fix what their emerging powers had broken. "Pack your bags," she said quietly. "We're leaving tonight." "Where are we going?" Marcus asked. Elena met his ancient wise eyes and spoke words that terrified her. "To find your father." The words hung in the air, like a curse Elena couldn't take back. Luna dropped the ceramic shard she'd been holding, the small piece hitting the floor with a sound that seemed to echo forever. Marcus went perfectly still, his 7-year-old face cycling through confusion, hope, and something that looked disturbingly like recognition. "Our father isn't dead?" Luna's voice was barely a whisper. Elena's hands began to shake. 7 years of careful lies, of constructed grief, of bedtime stories about a loving man who'd been taken too soon, all crumbling in the space of a heartbeat. She'd always known this moment would come, but facing it felt like stepping off a cliff into an abyss she couldn't see the bottom of. "No," she said finally, the words scraping her throat raw. "He's not dead. Then why did you tell us he was?" Marcus's question carried an adult's weight of betrayal. The hurt in his eyes was devastating. Elena closed her eyes, Carmen's warning echoing in her mind. Someone was asking questions. Someone who knew too much. The careful world she'd built in these woods was already gone. She just hadn't admitted it yet. "Because I was protecting you. Because his world. It's dangerous. More dangerous than people hunting us." Marcus stood slowly, ceramic fragments falling from his small hands. "Because that's what's happening, isn't it? Someone's coming for us." Too smart. He'd always been too smart, reading situations with an intuition that had nothing to do with his age. Elena looked at her son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing her child's face. When had his eyes become so knowing? When had he started moving with that fluid grace that reminded her of shadows and moonlight? "Yes," she admitted. "Someone's looking for us." "Then we should run again," Luna said practically, already moving toward their bedroom. "Like before, we'll go deeper into the forest, or maybe to Canada, or—" "No," Elena's voice stopped Luna mid-step. "We can't keep running. They're getting closer, and you're both getting stronger. Eventually someone's going to notice what you can do." What they were becoming, she didn't say. What they'd always been, despite her desperate attempts to keep them human. Marcus tilted his head, studying her with those too perceptive eyes. "You're afraid of him, our father." Elena's laugh came out broken. Afraid didn't begin to cover it. Terrified of seeing him again, of confronting the choices she'd made, of watching her carefully. Human children discover their true nature. Terrified of the man who'd loved her for one perfect night and then vanished, leaving her pregnant with children who defied every law of nature she understood. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm afraid. But you think he can protect us?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications Elena wasn't ready to face. Could Lucian protect them? Would he even want to? She'd fled before he could learn about the pregnancy, convinced that a creature of his power and age would see their children as either weapons to be shaped or threats to be eliminated. But now, watching Marcus and Luna grow stronger every day, she was beginning to understand a terrible truth. Their father might be the only one who could teach them control. The only one who understood what they were becoming. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But he's powerful. More powerful than whoever's hunting us." Luna crept closer, slipping her small hand into Elena's. Her touch was warm, warmer than it had been this morning. Even her body temperature was shifting as her abilities grew. "Will he like us?" Luna asked in a small voice. "Even though we're different?" Elena's heart shattered. Her daughter, her brave, gifted, impossible daughter, was afraid of being rejected by a father she'd never met. A father whose blood sang in her veins, whose power flowed through every cell of her being. "You're his children," Elena said, pulling Luna close. "You're part of him." Marcus hadn't moved from his position by the scattered ceramic. "What kind of different are we, Mom? Really different, I mean, not just the healing." The question Elena had been dreading for 7 years. The conversation that would end their childhood and thrust them into a reality she'd spent their entire lives trying to shield them from. She looked at her son, at the way shadows seemed to bend toward him, at the inhuman stillness he could achieve when he was thinking, at Luna, whose eyes reflected light like a cat's in certain angles, whose touch could mend anything broken. "Pack your things," she said instead of answering. "We leave in an hour, Mom." Marcus started. 1 hour. Elena stood abruptly, needing distance from those ancient eyes in her child's face. "I need to make some calls." She retreated to her bedroom, closing the door behind her, and leaned against it as her carefully constructed world finished collapsing around her. In 60 minutes, she would take her children to meet a vampire king. God help them all. Elena's hands trembled as she pulled out the single item she'd sworn never to use. A black cell phone hidden beneath her emergency medical supplies, its battery long dead after 3 years of deliberate neglect. The phone that connected directly to a world she'd fled, carrying numbers she'd memorized but prayed she'd never need. As she waited for it to power on, voices carried from the kitchen. Luna's anxious questions, Marcus's steady reassurances that sounded far too mature for 7 years old. Her children, preparing to meet a father who ruled creatures of darkness from castles she'd tried to forget. The phone buzzed to life. 3 missed calls from an international number she recognized with a jolt of terror and longing. Recent calls, within the last week, he knew. Elena's breath caught as she stared at the number on the screen. Somehow, impossibly, Lucian had found her trail. The European Foundation asking questions, the mysterious Dr. Victor Thorne. It all made sense now. He wasn't just hunting them, he was coming for them. Her finger hovered over the callback button. 7 years of silence stretched between her and the man who'd changed everything with a single night of impossible passion. 7 years of raising his children in secret, watching them grow into something that defied nature itself. The call connected before the first ring. "Elena." His voice was exactly as she remembered. Dark velvet wrapped around steel, carrying centuries of power and authority. But underneath the controlled surface, she heard something that made her knees weak, desperate relief. Lucian. His name felt foreign on her tongue after years of calling him only your father to the twins. Are they safe? No preliminaries. No accusations about her deception. No demands for explanations. Just a father's primary concern. Elena closed her eyes, unprepared for the emotion that crashed through her. For now. But someone's been asking questions. Getting close. Victor. The name carried a growl that raised every hair on her arms. He serves those who would use our children's gifts for purposes that would destroy them. How long since he was in Seattle? Our children. The casual possessiveness in his voice should have angered her. Instead, it felt like coming home. 5 days. Lucian, they're not what you think they are. They're not like you. No, he agreed, and she heard something like wonder creep into his tone. There's something far more impossible. Children who chose healing over hunting, who channel vampiric power through human compassion. Do you have any idea how unprecedented that is? Elena sank onto her bed, overwhelmed by the confirmation of her deepest fears. You know what they can do. I've been tracking reports of miraculous healings across the Pacific Northwest for 2 years. Children saved from fatal accidents, terminal patients experiencing spontaneous remissions, always in places where a woman matching your description was seen with twins. I should have found you sooner, but you were thorough in covering your tracks. Pride and terror warred in her chest. I was protecting them. I know. His voice softened, carrying forgiveness she didn't deserve. But they need guidance now, Elena. Their abilities are growing beyond what untrained children can control, and there are forces moving, old enemies who see our children as either weapons to be claimed or threats to be eliminated. Through her bedroom door, Elena heard the twins moving through their nightly routine with unusual efficiency. No arguments about which books to pack, no tears over abandoned toys. They understood, with that unsettling intuition they'd inherited, that this wasn't another temporary relocation. This was an ending. "Where do we meet you?" she asked, the words feeling like stepping off a precipice. The Blackthorn Estate, Olympic Peninsula, near Port Angeles. I'll send coordinates. You have a house here? Elena tried to picture ancient Lucian Blackthorn living anywhere in the Pacific Northwest's rain-soaked wilderness. I've had holdings here for 50 years, waiting. The admission hung between them, loaded with implications she wasn't ready to examine. Elena. I believed you died in that car accident. If I'd known about the children, everything would have been different, she finished. I know. I made that choice. Why? The single word carried 7 years of questions. Elena looked toward the door, listening to her children prepare for a journey that would change everything. Because I wanted them to be human. Because I was terrified of what you might make them become. And now I'm more terrified of what I can't protect them from. A crash from the kitchen made her heart stop, followed by Luna's voice, high and panicked. Mom, something's wrong with Marcus. Elena dropped the phone and ran, finding Marcus standing frozen in the center of the kitchen, his 7-year-old frame radiating power that made the air itself feel electric. Luna cowered behind the table as every glass in their cabinets began to vibrate, responding to whatever was building inside him. I can't make it stop, he whispered, tears streaming down his face as shadows gathered around his feet like living things. Elena reached for him just as her abandoned phone buzzed with a text containing coordinates and a single line. Bring them home. Tonight. Before it's too late. Elena froze as the shadows around Marcus deepened, spreading across the kitchen floor like spilled ink. The glasses in the cabinets weren't just vibrating now. They were singing, a high crystalline note that made her teeth ache. Luna pressed herself against the wall, her own eyes beginning to glow with an inner light that had nothing to do with the overhead fixtures. Marcus, breathe, Elena said, fighting to keep her voice calm as she approached her son. Just like we practiced with the healing exercises, in and out. It's different, he gasped, his small hands clenched into fists. It's not warm like the healing. It's cold, and it wants to. The shadows pulsed, and the singing glasses cracked in perfect unison, spiderweb fractures spreading across their surfaces without a single piece falling. Elena's phone buzzed from where she dropped it. Through the speaker, she heard Lucian's voice, sharp with urgency. Elena, what's happening? She snatched up the phone. Marcus is having some kind of episode. The shadows, they're moving, and he's manifesting early. The stress of discovery is accelerating their development. Lucian's voice cut through her panic like a lifeline. "You need to get them away from there immediately. Victor's people will have felt that power surge." As if summoned by his words, car headlights swept across their front window, too bright, too many, cutting through the forest darkness like searchlights. Elena's blood turned to ice. "They're here," she whispered. "Back door. Now. Take them into the forest and head northwest to the coordinates. I'm coming." Elena grabbed both children's hands. Luna's fever warm, Marcus's unnaturally cold. "We have to go. Right now." The shadows around Marcus flickered and died as his fear shifted to something more familiar, the need to run, to hide, to protect his sister. Luna's eyes dimmed back to their normal brown, though tears continued to streak down her cheeks. "Our bags." Luna started. No time. Elena pulled them toward the back door, as the sound of car doors slamming echoed from the front of the house. "Whatever happens, stay close to me, and don't use your abilities unless I tell you to." They slipped into the cold November night, the Olympic Peninsula forest embracing them with familiar shadows. Elena had memorized every trail within 5 miles of their home, but tonight the familiar paths felt different, hostile, as if the trees themselves knew they were being hunted. Behind them, flashlight beams cut through the windows of their cabin. Elena counted at least 6 lights moving through their home with military precision. These weren't researchers interested in spontaneous healing. These were professionals. "Mom," Marcus whispered as they crept along a deer trail. "I can hear them talking. They're saying things about taking us somewhere, about testing our blood." Elena's stomach lurched. Marcus shouldn't be able to hear anything from this distance. His abilities weren't just growing. They were evolving faster than she'd imagined possible. A twig snapped somewhere behind them. Too close, too deliberate. Elena pulled the twins off the trail and into a thicket of undergrowth, pressing a finger to her lips as footsteps approached. Through the bare winter branches, she saw a figure in tactical gear sweep past, night vision goggles reflecting green in the darkness. When the footsteps faded, Elena checked her phone's GPS. The coordinates Lucian had sent were still 3 miles northwest, deeper into the federal wilderness where most people wouldn't dare venture in November. But they weren't dealing with most people. They moved in silence for 20 minutes, Elena guiding them along forgotten logging roads and game trails. The twins followed without complaint, their unnatural stamina, another reminder of their hybrid nature. But as they climbed higher into the hills, Luna began to lag, her breath coming in short puffs. "I can't walk anymore," she whispered, stumbling over a root. Elena turned to help her daughter and gasped. Luna's skin was beginning to glow with a soft, pearl-like luminescence, beautiful and utterly inhuman. "Something's wrong," Marcus said, moving to his sister's side. Where his hand touched Luna's arm, the glow intensified, as if their abilities were resonating with each other. "She feels too warm." The sound of voices carried through the forest. Their pursuers had found their trail. Elena's phone rang, Lucian's number flashing on the screen. She answered without speaking. "I can sense them." His voice was tight with controlled fury. "All 3 of you. The children are burning through their energy reserves trying to suppress what they are. They need to stop fighting their nature. If they don't suppress it, those people will find us. Those people will find you anyway." Victor's team includes vampires, Elena. They can track the children's scent now that their abilities have manifested. The words hit her like a physical blow. Vampires. She'd spent 7 years convincing herself they were running from human threats, that keeping the twins' abilities secret would be enough. But there had never been any hiding from their father's world. "Tell them," Lucian said softly. "Tell them what they are. It's time." Elena looked at her children, Marcus with his shadow-touched eyes, Luna glowing like a fallen star. Her babies, who still believed in bedtime stories and good triumphing over evil. "Mom?" Marcus was studying her face with that unsettling perception. "We're not entirely human, are we?" The question hung in the cold air between them as flashlight beams began to flicker through the distant trees. The truth sat between them like a living thing, demanding acknowledgement after 7 years of careful deflection. Elena knelt in the damp forest floor, pulling both children close as the flashlight beams grew brighter through the trees. "No," she whispered, the word tearing from her throat. "You're not entirely human." Luna's luminescence pulsed brighter, as if her body was responding to the admission. Marcus went completely still, that inhuman stillness that had always unnerved Elena when he was thinking deeply. "What are we then?" Marcus asked, with the calm of a child who'd suspected this moment was coming his entire life. Elena's hands shook as she cupped their faces. Her impossible children, born from a love that should never have been possible. "Your father he's a vampire, a very old, very powerful vampire. And that makes you—" "Half vampire," Marcus finished, his voice carrying no surprise, only confirmation of something he'd already known. "That's why we can heal people. That's why I see things differently sometimes. Why Luna glows when she's upset. Why we're always hungry but never for regular food," Luna added softly, her glow dimming as understanding replaced confusion. "Why we don't get sick like other kids." The voices of their pursuers grew closer. Elena could hear boots crushing through undergrowth, the low murmur of tactical communications. They had maybe 5 minutes before this conversation became academic. "Your father, Lucian, he thought I was dead when you were born. I let him think that because I was afraid." Elena forced herself to meet their eyes, to give them the truth even as their world collapsed. "I was afraid he'd turn you into something dark, something that hunts instead of heals." "But we chose healing," Marcus said, something ancient flickering behind his 7-year-old features. "Even before we knew what we were choosing between." Elena nodded, tears streaming down her face. "You chose to be more human than some humans. You chose compassion over power, healing over hunting. But now people know what you can do, and they want to use you." Luna's hand found hers, surprisingly strong for such a small girl. "The people chasing us, they're bad people? Some of them are vampires loyal to your father's enemies. Some are humans who think they can control your abilities, use them as weapons." Elena stood, checking her phone's GPS with shaking fingers. "Still 2 miles to Lucian's coordinates. But your father is coming. He'll protect you." "Will he try to change us?" Marcus asked, shadows gathering unconsciously around his feet. "Make us more like him?" The question Elena had been avoiding for 7 years. Would Lucian try to suppress their humanity, embrace their vampiric heritage? Would he see their healing gifts as weakness or strength? "I don't know," she admitted. "But he's your father. Whatever else he is, that blood connection means something to his kind." A branch cracked, too close for comfort. Elena grabbed their hands and pulled them deeper into the forest, following a steep deer path that led higher into the hills. Luna was moving better now, as if accepting her nature had given her access to reserves of strength she'd been unconsciously suppressing. "Mom," Marcus said as they climbed, his voice eerily calm. "I can smell them, the ones following us. Some of them smell wrong, like death and old blood. Vampires." Elena's stomach clenched as she realized her son was developing tracking abilities in real time, his hybrid nature responding to the threat by awakening dormant instincts. "How many?" she asked, hating herself for needing to know. Marcus paused, tilting his head like a wild animal reading the wind. 6 humans, 3 others. 9 total. Elena clutched her phone like a lifeline as they reached a small clearing halfway up the ridge. The coordinates were still over a mile away, but Luna was breathing hard again, her luminescence flickering erratically. "I need to rest," Luna gasped, sinking onto a fallen log. "We can't stop." Elena knelt beside her daughter, feeling the fever radiating from her small body. "Sweetheart, I need you to be strong a little longer." "She's fighting a transformation," Marcus said with disturbing insight. "Her body wants to change, but she's holding it back." Elena stared at her son. When had he become so perceptive about supernatural physiology? When had her 7-year-old developed an understanding of vampiric biology that matched her years of research? "Let it happen," she decided, the words feeling like surrender and salvation combined. Both of you, stop fighting what you are. Your father was right. You're burning through your energy trying to stay human. Luna looked up at her with wide, trusting eyes. You're sure? Elena kissed her daughter's forehead, tasting the salt of her own tears. I'm sure. Be what you were meant to be. The change began immediately. Luna's glow steadied, becoming something beautiful and otherworldly. Marcus straightened, his movements gaining that fluid grace that had always reminded Elena of his father. Both children suddenly looked more alert, more powerful, more themselves than they'd ever been allowed to be. Behind them, something howled in the darkness, not human, not entirely animal. Their pursuers were closing in. The howl echoed through the forest again, closer this time, and Elena realized with ice-cold clarity that everything she'd spent 7 years preparing for was about to be tested. Her children stood transformed before her, no longer fighting their dual nature but embracing it, and for the first time since fleeing the hospital, she felt the true weight of what they were up against. They're not just tracking us, Marcus said, his enhanced senses reading threats Elena couldn't even perceive. They're herding us, pushing us toward something. The coordinates. Elena's blood turned to water as understanding crashed over her. What if Lucian's location wasn't safety but a trap? What if Victor's people knew about the meeting point, were using it to— No, she whispered. Then louder. No, we're not going to the coordinates. Luna's luminescent form turned toward her, confusion flickering across her transformed features. But Dad said, your father could be walking into the same trap we are. Elena's medical training kicked in, years of emergency decision-making under pressure. We changed direction, now. She pulled out her phone to call Lucian, warn him, but the screen showed no signal bars. Too deep in the mountains, too far from the nearest tower. They were on their own. The sound of coordinated movement crashed through the undergrowth. Their pursuers had stopped trying to be subtle. Elena counted at least 4 different approach vectors, the tactical precision speaking to military training. These weren't researchers anymore. These were soldiers. Mom, Luna's voice carried an edge Elena had never heard before, something that raised every maternal instinct to screaming alert. I can feel something else, something old and angry, moving faster than the others. Marcus nodded, shadows writhing around his small frame like living armor. It feels like it wants to hurt us specifically, not capture us. Hurt us. Victor. Elena had read enough of Lucian's world to understand that some vampires viewed half-breeds as abominations to be destroyed, rather than weapons to be claimed. If Victor was here personally, if he'd decided the twins were too dangerous to live. A figure materialized from the trees ahead of them, moving with inhuman speed and grace. Tall, pale, with eyes that reflected light like a predator's. Ancient power radiated from him in waves that made the air itself feel heavy. Dr. Elena Ravenscroft. Victor's voice carried a European accent polished by centuries of use. And the infamous half-blood twins. How refreshingly intact you all are. Elena stepped protectively in front of her children, but Marcus moved to her side with fluid grace, shadows gathering around him like storm clouds. Luna's glow intensified, but instead of the warm light Elena had grown accustomed to, this radiance held an edge of something dangerous. Stay behind me, Elena whispered. But even as she said it, she knew the absurdity. What could she, a human pediatric surgeon, do against a creature that had survived for centuries? Victor smiled, revealing fangs that caught the moonlight. The children have been so careful, haven't they? Healing instead of hunting, choosing compassion over their birthright. Such waste of potential. His gaze fixed on Marcus. Though I sense that's changing, isn't it, boy? I can smell the darkness awakening in you. We're not like you, Luna said, her young voice steady despite the power crackling around her small form. We chose differently. Choice, Victor laughed, the sound like breaking glass. A luxury you'll discover means nothing when survival is at stake. He gestured, and Elena heard the tactical teams moving into position around the clearing. "Your father sent you running to him, didn't he? Promised protection, sanctuary. But Lucian Blackthorn's protection comes with a price. Submission to what you truly are." Elena's worst fears crystallized into terrible clarity. This wasn't just about capturing the twins or eliminating them. This was about forcing them to choose between their human compassion and their vampiric power, proving that darkness would ultimately win. "He's trying to separate us from Dad," Marcus said quietly, his supernatural intuition cutting through Victor's psychological manipulation. "Make us afraid so we'll run away from the meeting point." The 7-year-old's tactical assessment stunned Elena. When had her children become strategists? When had they learned to read enemy intentions with such precision? Victor's smile faltered slightly. Clever boy. Yes, family reunions can be so complicated, especially when the children might prove more powerful than the father. His eyes gleamed with ancient malice. "Tell me, little ones, what happens when you're forced to choose between saving your mother's life and maintaining your precious humanity?" Elena felt the trap closing around them with surgical precision. Not just a physical trap, an emotional and psychological one designed to shatter everything her children believed about themselves. The tactical teams emerged from the trees in perfect synchronization, weapons trained not on the twins, but on Elena herself. Victor's message was clear: transform into the monsters he believed them to be, or watch their mother die. Behind her, Elena felt power building, not the warm, healing energy she'd grown accustomed to, but something darker, more primal. Her children were being forced to confront the fundamental question that had driven her to hide them for 7 years. When everything you love is threatened, what are you willing to become to save it? The moment stretched taut as a surgical wire, and Elena watched her carefully constructed world begin to collapse with devastating precision. The red laser dots dancing across her chest painted a picture she'd spent 7 years trying to prevent. Her children witnessing the moment their mother's life hung by a thread, their healing nature powerless against bullets designed to kill instantly. "Fascinating," Victor murmured, his ancient eyes studying the twins with scientific detachment. "I can smell the conflict in them, human compassion warring with vampiric rage. Which will triumph, do you think, Dr. Ravenscroft?" Elena felt Marcus tense beside her, shadows deepening around his small frame until they seemed to swallow the moonlight itself. Luna's glow shifted, the warm pearl radiance she'd always associated with healing taking on crimson undertones that made Elena's blood freeze. This wasn't the gentle power that had saved countless children in the hospital. This was something else entirely. "Don't," Elena whispered, understanding with terrifying clarity what Victor was orchestrating. "Whatever you're feeling, whatever you think you need to do, don't." But Marcus was no longer listening with a 7-year-old's ears. His head tilted with predatory focus as he counted heartbeats, mapped vulnerabilities, calculated kill trajectories with an efficiency that belonged to creatures far older and infinitely more dangerous. 8 humans, Marcus said softly, his voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there moments before. Fragile, slow, afraid, his gaze fixed on Victor, and one very old vampire who thinks he's untouchable. Victor's smile widened. "There it is, the birthright you've been denying." He gestured to his tactical team. "Your mother dies in 30 seconds unless you show me what you really are beneath all that misguided healing." Elena's medical training screamed at her to assess the situation clinically, but this wasn't a trauma bay where skill and knowledge could save lives. This was supernatural warfare, and she was catastrophically outmatched. Her phone showed no signal. Lucian was still miles away. Her children were transforming into something she'd never seen before, something that might save their lives but cost them their souls. 20 seconds, Victor announced. Luna's power erupted without warning, but instead of the gentle warmth Elena knew, this energy burned cold and sharp. The trees around the clearing withered at the touch of her light, leaves curling and dying as if her very presence was draining life rather than nurturing it. Her 7-year-old daughter was learning, in real time, that healing and harming were simply opposite faces of the same supernatural coin. Luna, no. Elena reached for her daughter, but Marcus caught her wrist with strength that could have crushed bone. She's protecting you, Marcus said, his eyes now reflecting light like his father's. We both are. The first tactical operative screamed as Luna's inverted healing energy found him, his life force suddenly flowing in reverse, vitality becoming weakness, strength becoming decay. He dropped his weapon and collapsed, not dead, but aging years in seconds. Victor laughed with genuine delight. Magnificent, death magic combined with life force manipulation. I've never seen anything quite like it. Elena watched in horror as her son moved with impossible speed, shadows trailing behind him like living things. The soldiers' night vision goggles became useless as Marcus plunged their section of forest into supernatural darkness. Tactical training meant nothing against an enemy who could step between shadows, who could see in absolute blackness, who no longer thought like a human child. "Stop!" Elena screamed, but her voice was lost in the chaos as her children systematically dismantled a military operation with powers she'd never imagined they possessed. This was her failure. 7 years of hiding, of teaching them to value human life, of showing them that their gifts were meant for healing, all of it crumbling as they embraced the vampiric heritage she'd tried so desperately to suppress. They were saving her life by becoming everything she'd feared they might become. Victor stepped closer, ignoring the carnage around them, his attention fixed entirely on Elena's anguish. "Do you understand now? This is what they truly are, what they've always been beneath your human delusions of choice and morality. Predators, killers, my kind." Luna's power reached for another soldier, but this time Elena threw herself between them, feeling her daughter's death magic slam into her with the force of a freight train. Pain exploded through every nerve as her own life force began to drain, years of her life bleeding away in seconds. "Mom!" Luna's anguished cry broke through the supernatural darkness as she realized what she'd done, what she'd become. Elena collapsed, feeling her heartbeat stutter, her vision graying at the edges. Through failing eyes, she saw her children's transformation reverse itself in an instant, shadows fleeing from Marcus like startled birds. Luna's deadly radiance dimming back to terrified brown eyes. They'd learned the lesson Victor intended, but not the way he'd expected. In trying to save her, they'd nearly killed her themselves, and in that moment of devastating realization, Elena knew they'd lost everything that mattered.